Good morning everyone and welcome to the latest edition of On the Whistle, where we're going to have a chat through Sheffield Wednesday 1, Sunderland 2. A couple of things, sorry this is a bit late, the Friday night kick-off thing really threw me. The other thing is, regular viewers, don't be alarmed, the moustache is very much temporary. My razor broke halfway through shaving, so don't worry, by the time you watch the podcast this week, the Raw podcast, it'll be gone, so don't be alarmed. As ever, we're going to have a chat through the game. I'm going to give you some thoughts on it. Obviously, me and James chatted through in our immediate reaction, which you can view earlier on the YouTube channel, but I'll have a little bit of a longer chat through the game and my thoughts on it. And then as ever, I'll get into the questions and comments you sent in, some great ones as ever this week, and we'll just have a little chat about the general state of play at Sunderland. So in terms of the game at Hillsborough itself, I think obviously we came away from the whole game a week before really disappointed with Sunderland's performance, but also I think we all talked about the fact that in the last 10 minutes, Sunderland had a clear handball turned down where the whole defender very obviously lifted his arm to handle the ball. And although Sunderland hadn't played very well, and I don't think many of us felt that they deserved a win, who knows, with 10 minutes left in the game, if they get a penalty, an equaliser, the crowd's up, Hull attire, and maybe they go on and win the game. And so while it was a poor performance, I think we all felt that luck had been against them. And I guess that's football. I think a week on, we have to accept that all the luck was with Sunderland, really. Early on in the game, Leo Hjelde brought into the side ahead of Dennis Erkin. I think it's a set piece in which he lifts his hand and it clearly strikes his arm. I think in an era, in the Premier League, if we had VAR, I think that's getting given. So I think that's one that Sunderland get away with. And then obviously Eliza Mienda's first goal, a good ball over the top from Leo Hjelde. Mienda, although it's not deliberate, the ball clearly hits his arm as it drops over his shoulder and he then goes on to score. A little bit of fortune in the goal itself, and obviously the defender blocks his shot and it rebounds off Mienda and in. I think that we have to be honest and say that all the luck was with Sunderland, both of those two decisions. Although to Danny Röhl, the Sheffield Wednesday manager's credit, he said that although the first goal shouldn't have been allowed, he did say that, if your defence fails to deal with the ball forward like that, when you have a numerical advantage as well, you have to look at yourselves first, which I thought was spot on, really, and fair play to him for that. Sheffield Wednesday also missed some big early chances. I'm thinking especially the one where Josh Windass, that really nice ball out to the right, low cross across. He crashed the 6-yard box really well and somehow put it over the bar. I did think that the luck was with Sunderland's, and I think, listening to Danny Röhl afterwards in his press conference, kind of hard not to sympathise a little bit, just in terms of, 3 of his main centre-halves are out. His makeshift centre-half, Max Lowe, who's a left-back who's moved infield, then gets injured in the game. He lost Jan Valery and Stuart Armstrong to calf injuries in the week, 2 really important players. Obviously, Jan Valery, another defender that he was missing. Illness, Michael Smith was missing, and then Callum Patterson, who was just a player that I absolutely love, to be honest, an absolute warrior. Always gives you everything, an absolute nightmare to play against, I would imagine, and pops up with goals as he did the other day. An absolutely fantastic player in the Championship over the last decade or so, having such a good game, scores a goal, and then of course limps off with an injury. So I think that I sympathised a bit with Röhl, and I think that Sheffield Wednesday were probably the better team until Sunderland's second goal. I have to say that after that, I thought their confidence and their energy really drained, and I thought that Sunderland managed the game excellently after their second goal. So I'm not going to say that I thought that Sunderland were really fortunate to get away with a win. They scored an excellent second goal. Brilliant cross from Trey Hume, brilliant header from Eliza Mienda. I thought from then in, they were in an element of cruise control, really. I can think of Luke O'Neill making one brilliant block later on. But otherwise, I don't think Sheffield Wednesday really threatened. So for all that, I do think luck was on Sunderland's side. I thought there was some good things on show from Sunderland. And I think from a Sunderland perspective as well is, we spoke after the whole game about the squad looking really tired, like it looked like it needed a refresh, like some players needed a breather. Le Bris, I think, was quite brave. Obviously, he had to make two changes to his team from Hull because Enzo Lefay and Dan Ballard were injured. But to make 3 additional to that, to rest Chris Rigg, to bring Dennis Erkin out the side, to rest Wilson Isidore, a really brave decision, to be honest, because of how consistent Isidore's been, and one that would have drawn a lot of criticism if Sunderland hadn't won the game. But he picked the right game because we all knew that Sunderland had looked laboured. And I think you have to say that if we're saying that Sunderland didn't produce the best performance we've ever seen from the season, then that kind of makes sense, because I think it's obvious that when you make so many changes, it's going to be a little bit of a disjointed performance. And I think we saw that at times in the first half. I thought Sheffield Wednesday looked more familiar. They looked like they had a bit more comfort in the way they were playing. And it took Sunderland a little while to get up to the speed of the game, I think. But in the end, I think you have to give credit to Le Bris, because his gamble, although it looked a little bit dodgy at times, his gamble has paid off, because Sunderland have got 3 really valuable points. It just gives them a bit of breathing space moving forward. It keeps them in the race for the top 2, even though we know that's, kind of does look very unlikely now. And most importantly, he's got some really, really valuable minutes into some players who needed it. So Bienda, another start, great for his confidence, scoring 2 goals going into the rest of the season. Alan Brown, really valuable to get 60-odd minutes, his first football since November. Another 85 minutes for Romain Mundle. Leo Hjelde, something to 1 injury away, make no mistake, from needing Leo Hjelde to be ready to come in and perform at Championship standards. So to get that game into his legs, to get him used to the intensity of Championship football again, could be something that turns out to be really valuable in the weeks ahead. So I think that it was a really good night for Sunderland, even if the performance wasn't necessarily the best we've seen. It certainly wasn't them at their free-flowing best. So loads of positives to take away from a Sunderland perspective. First and foremost, I think Elijah Mienda, what an absolutely fantastic player this guy is turning into, a genuine match winner. Whenever he's on the pitch, he seems to chip in either with a goal or an assist, which is a really, really good knack for any player to have, never mind a 19-year-old striker. So let's have a look at some of the questions and comments you sent in. As ever, thanks so much for sending them in. You can do that on YouTube under our immediate reaction video, or you can do so over on my Blue Sky, where I always ask for questions after full time. So the first one I've got here was from over on our YouTube channel. Thanks for this. Some boy called says, excuse me, pleased with the 3 points, but why were we so flat? I think there's a few things that I would mention here. Listen, I do think someone can play better. I think we can all see that, and hopefully that's something moving forward. I would say a few things. The one that I've just talked about is I do think when you make so many changes to your team, you bring in players who, in the case of Alan Brown, hasn't played since November. I thought he did really well in those circumstances. But I think you're always going to be a little bit disjointed. I don't think you're going to produce a really fluid performance, I think, in that circumstance. I think that was one. I think the stage of the season, I think both teams, especially towards the end of the game, the second half, I have to say, was, other than Sunderland's goal, which was excellent, was pretty low quality stuff. And I think that speaks to the fatigue you have at this kind of time of the season, with about 10 or 11 games left. So I think that was another factor. The other thing I would say is that, and of course it's the same for both teams, and I thought you saw that, the pitch was terrible. I thought the pitch was in really, really, really bad nick for a Championship football club. Credit to Sheffield Wednesday, in the first half, they dealt with it better. They were the ones who were able to play the better passing football, that they were able to, despite the pitch, create some good chances by playing through the lines. Sunderland struggled to do that. So obviously it's the same for both teams. So I wouldn't use it as too much of an excuse from a Sunderland perspective, but I do think it was a factor in the game. It was really, really poor. And even at times you could see when Sheffield Wednesday were chasing the game later on, there were passes that didn't look too overhit to me, that were just running out for a throw-in or a goal kick. It happened throughout the game for both teams. So I think that was definitely a factor. I think, as you've said there, pleased with the 3 points. I think it's one of those games where you just get the result and move on from it, to be honest. I think sometimes, especially at this stage of the season, the result is more important from the performance. And I think that's something, especially in this case, it's true of Sunderland. So Darren Hans was asking, as I think a lot of people were wondering, Ian Poveda, was he injured, or was it another sort of disciplinary matter? He is injured. This is a real I think frustration for Sunderland, because obviously they were hoping he was getting into a position where he was going to be able to really, really challenge Patrick Roberts for replacing the team, offer a really dynamic option off the bench. We've seen it in little moments, but not anywhere near consistent enough. Darren obviously referring there to the game where we understand he was late for a team meeting. I think it was the Luton game, wasn't it? And wasn't included in the squad. That's been resolved, but in the training session before the Sheffield Wednesday game, he's picked up an injury which meant he missed the squad. Now I have no idea at the moment how serious that is, so touch wood, fingers crossed, it might be one of those where he's literally back next week and he can play a part in that 3-game week. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll get an update from Régis Le Bris later this week ahead of the Cardiff game on that one, but hopefully it's not a serious one, because someone really need him. Patrick Roberts has played so much football this season. At some point, Poveda needs to sort of challenge him, so fingers crossed that can happen soon. Sorry about that, just needed a bit of coffee. A couple of questions were sent in on Mienda, and I thought it was worth chatting about Mienda a little bit more, just because of how well he's doing, really. Michael Bowers says, is Mienda proof that we often definitively judge a player too quickly? Just because someone isn't the finished article straight away, it doesn't automatically mean they're a poor player. And then Ian Crowe says, Elijah Mienda, from failed Hibs loan to 11 Championship goals assists so far. He's getting better, learning and being trusted. What have you made of his progress, Phil? A young player of the season contender, ? Also, does this back how the club give lads from abroad time to settle before giving them opportunities? I think the point you make is a really, really good one here, and I think it relates to Michael's point about whether we judge a player a bit too quickly. I think the last season was a bit different, really. I'm not sure how much it was about judging Meander as a player too quickly. I think anyone who saw that game, if you remember, I think it was his first appearance, where he came on against Huddersfield and he nearly scored an absolutely brilliant goal when he burst through. Really, really powerful shot that I think it struck the keeper either on his shoulder or in his face, and he barely had any time to kind of know what was happening. Everyone could see that Meander had a lot of talent, and he's someone who's played at a really good level. He played at youth international, don't forget. So I think everyone could see the promise. I think the thing last season was that the feeling was that it's okay to put. Everyone understands how expensive strikers can get. Everyone understands how difficult it is to sign strikers. So I think everyone understands if you have the opportunity to sign talented young strikers, to put them into your club in the hope that they'll grow and potentially save you an absolute fortune in the future, and that's an excellent thing to do. The problem last season was that the strikers who Sunderland brought in to have an immediate impact, so that would obviously be Mason Burstow as sort of a Premier League loanee, obviously Nazari Rusyn as well. Those players weren't able to hit the ground running, and I think that magnified the other signings. Lewis Hamia, obviously in a similar bracket to Meander, really someone who played most of his career in youth football, and that it was really, really frustrating that Sunderland hadn't corrected the immediate issue, and I think that made it harder to be patient with the players who Sunderland had signed for the long term. I think Meander, I think you're absolutely right, Ian. It shows that when players come from abroad, it's a completely new division. It's a completely new language. Don't underestimate the importance of that, especially in the modern game where there's a lot of tactical detail that players have to take in. The language thing can be really important. It shows that you do need a little bit of time, and it definitely shows that we need a little bit of patience. And I think Milan Alexic hopefully will be in a similar boat, where a season of adjusting to a new environment, hopefully next season he'll be in a really good position to kick on, in the same way that Elijah Meander has done this season. And all of a sudden you're looking at it going, wow, we've got an absolute bargain here. I mean, Elijah Meander at the moment looks like an outstanding bit of business when you look at some of the fees that Championship strikers go for. So I think it does show, I agree with you both, in that it shows that you have to be patient with these players. It does take time. It's very, very rare for a player to be able to come to an entirely new environment and hit the ground running immediately, especially if they are adjusting to the language. I think that's a really important thing. So we do have to be patient, but it underlines as well what's been really good this season is Meander's been able to develop, because there's a player who was here to hit the ground running, ready, sort of experienced in senior football, and Wilson Isidore. And so I think that shows that you need to get the blend right. It's a really, really positive, good thing to be in a position where you can invest in young talent and be patient with them. But at the end of the day, Sunderland in the Championship, they have to be competing, they have to be winning games. I think that's just inevitable because of the size of the club. And to be fair, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think fans should expect Sunderland to have a winning team in the Championship. So I think the Meander example is there's a little bit of a balance to be found in terms of how you do your recruitment. And Ian, he has to be a young player of the season contender because his goal contributions have been so significant. And I think there's a lot of credit, I've said it a couple of times this season, a lot of credit deserved for him, for the way that he's learned, come back from that Hibs loan, being in really good shape at the start of pre-season, ready to hit the ground running to make an impact. How much he listens to Le Bris, how much he takes on that tactical detail, how much he can execute it. And the reason why, one of the main reasons he emerged as Sunderland's first choice striker really in pre-season was because he was so good at understanding both the pressing, what Le Bris wanted from him, and executing it. Credit too for Le Bris for kind of ignoring last season, ignoring what happened at Hibs, that Meander couldn't really make an impact at that level, focusing on the fact that he could see on the training ground that Meander was taking those messages on board and trusting him despite whatever had gone in the past. So I think there's a lot of credit due to Meander and Le Bris on that one. So another question here from Sky Vibes 52, who says that, do you feel that Job is a bit concerned at the moment about putting his foot in and being yellow carded and given a 2-match ban? If he manages to survive the next couple of games, I think we'll see the real Job again. Yes, Job is obviously on 9 yellow cards. The cut-off's in 2 games' time. I do agree with you. I think that he is playing a little bit within himself in terms of, we know he loves to just crash into challenges to really get about the pitch. I think he is being sensible at the moment. I think he is managing his game. I do agree with you that I think if you get past that cut-off, it'll be a big relief to him. The one thing I will say about Job is on Friday night, maybe the first half wasn't the best I've seen him play for Sunderland. What I will say about him is, his athleticism and his ability always shines through towards the end of the games. And I think if you watch the last 10-15 minutes of that game back, the amount of times he made a really good challenge, interception, header in his own box, and then 2 minutes later, 30 seconds later even sometimes, he's up the pitch, carrying the ball out of danger, playing it into a teammate, buying his defenders a bit of rest. I think he was one of the main reasons Sunderland were able to manage the game so effectively. So I agree with you that in terms of, I think we'll see him back to a sort of dynamic, all-round game if he is able to get past his cut-off in a couple of games. But I do think in the end he was a really important part of Friday night's win. I think the way when other players tired, Job just seems to go from strength to strength. I think that's something we've seen all season. I think that's really impressive. Shiny Tom says, not a pretty watch and we rode our luck, but you take the result. I think we all agree with that. How good is Dan Neil? With all the conjecture about our young players, he's definitely top of the wanted list for me, especially with his contract situation unresolved at present. Yeah, I think that Dan is, for probably ever since that Swansea game really, has been Sunderland's best and most consistent player in my opinion. I think the other night was a really good example of that. It's not just his ability on the ball, which we all know about. I think his game management and his maturity is just improved so much, and he is playing like a captain right now, winning fouls late on to relieve pressure. Don't forget Sunderland's second goal, great cross again from him and a good header from Yenda. Neil won that because he won a free kick despite the fact that he had the ball with about 4 Sheffield Wednesday players around him, a potentially difficult situation that he was able to turn into a Sunderland attack. I just think he's playing so well at the moment. And I agree with you. I think if Sunderland don't get promoted and we go into the summer and Dan Neil has 1 year on his contract, in my opinion, Premier League clubs are going to try and sign Dan Neil. Listen, I don't know what will happen then. It'll be up to him, how he feels about the club's direction, how he feels about his career. The club will certainly revisit contract talks at the end of the season to try and sign him up. So let's see what happens. But I agree with your basic point, Tom, that I think it sometimes goes a little bit under the radar. I think there are other players in the squad that people talk about being signed by top tier clubs, and that might well happen. There's certainly interest, but I think Neil goes a little bit under the radar in terms of, I think maybe people haven't quite realised how difficult it's going to be for someone to hold on to Neil this summer. But ultimately, we don't have to worry about that right now. He loves Sunderland. He's determined to try and win promotion. You can see that in his performances. So fingers crossed he can sort of drag Sunderland over the line and we won't have to worry about that. A question here from Chris, which I thought was a good one, because my colleague James said exactly the same thing to me after the game, which I hadn't really considered at the time. How telling is that with Samed on the bench, he brought Harrison Jones on to see the game out. Albeit a very brief cameo, I thought he looked composed on the ball. I'm just going to bring another point in here because it's kind of similar, as you'll see. Stevie B, thanks for sending your comment in. Great win, and Dan Neil putting in a proper captain's performance. Only frustration was Le Bris going 5 at the back, inviting pressure onto us into the last 10 minutes. I know someone say it's worked as we won, but they had no real threat once Patterson went off injured. Yeah, as I mentioned at the start, the Patterson injury was a really important moment in the game. I definitely agree with that. I think that in terms of the Harrison Jones sub, and I think it speaks a little bit to that point about the subs, personally, I thought Le Bris' subs were good on Friday night. I thought they worked in that. I thought Sunderland had a really nice blend between being pragmatic and having enough defenders to defend their box well and defend the long balls really easily. But they had enough fresh legs and enough energy at the top end of the pitch to not just be sitting back inviting pressure. I thought Rig, Harrison Jones, as mentioned, did really well. Isidore, obviously, and then Job sort of supporting them. I thought the blend was quite good on Friday night, so I'm going to give Le Bris credit for that. I thought the extra defender helped because ultimately Sheffield Wednesday were launching a lot of long balls forward and Sunderland dealt with it pretty well. I think that the thing with Harrison Jones was, I think you're right to mention it's probably not great for Samed that Harrison Jones is getting on ahead of him. So in the past, I've tried to explain what I think Le Bris is thinking by playing Samed as an attacking midfielder when he comes off the bench. So much of what he's trying to do in that situation is to get a lot of energy on the pitch. So basically what you can do is, instead of allowing the opposition defenders to carry the ball quite far forward, feed the wingers really close to your box, feed the attacking midfielders close to your box where they can deliver really, really dangerous crosses, you try and apply pressure on the ball much higher up on the pitch so that the opposition has to go much longer, much earlier, and that's really much, much easier for your defence to deal with. So I think the thinking probably was that Harrison Jones was the best player with the kind of the energy and the legs to get up, to put some pressure on the ball, and to try and make sure that someone weren't just camped in their own box defending really dangerous crosses. And I thought it worked really well. Credit to Harrison Jones. I think as you've alluded to there, he must be doing really well behind the scenes to push his way into Le Bris' thinking ahead of those other options. And I agree with you. I thought he made good decisions on the ball. I thought it was a really, really tidy little cameo, so credit to him for that. As I say, I suspect the thinking was he felt he was the player with the best sort of energy, if you like, to go on and apply some pressure higher up the pitch, which Rig also did really well. Really nice to see Rig sort of thriving in that impact sub role. there's no doubt that on his day he's in Sunderland's best 11, but at the moment with where he is in terms of I think his fatigue and the amount of football he's played, it's a really good option. So thanks as ever for sending your questions in. I think I've got to most of them. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Really nice to be able to talk about a Sunderland win after a couple of disappointing defeats. And yeah, I'll be back next week after the Cardiff game, but of course we'll have the Raw podcast this week. We'll have loads of other preview content, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching.